first of all, it's nice to meet all of you, and it's really, and I don't usually say this, but I feel blessed to have arrived. Because of all this bad weather, I actually left my home in Boston yesterday, and had a tour of the Delta air routes. I've spent my whole grown-up life involved in the civil rights struggle that was ignited initially by Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and those who had been working for years in SNCC. Y'all know what that is? Oh, good. Most colleges I visit, undergrads, have no idea of that part of our American history. I was an unlikely recruit to political activism. I had gone to Harvard College, where I majored in English literature, intended to be a poet, studied, was a protege of a poet named Archibald Cleach, who taught at Harvard at the time, who won a Rhodes Scholarship under utterly false grounds. You're supposed to be an athlete, among other things, and I didn't even pass the Harvard swimming test. But I had a pretty good phony British accent after 4 years at Harvard. That's something you acquire there, even if you're from Utah. And I hated Oxford. I found it very aristocratic, and I was sort of humiliated to be supported by Cecil Rhodes, the builder of empires, and left quickly, went to Paris, where I was very fortunate to have bumped into, my first week in Paris, I physically bumped into Richard Wright, probably the greatest living Black American novelist, and also a very great American white novelist named William Styron. And I stayed there several years to learn to write, returned home in 1964, planning to go back to Harvard and become an academic, when, you see, I'd sort of missed, at Harvard, being an English major in the 50s, you sort of missed political fervor, really. I mean, it was Eisenhower who was president, and Harvard English majors didn't know. I mean, I barely heard that something was happening in Little Rock in 57. You know, it was on the edge of my understanding. Harvard was very isolated, insular. I got through Harvard and had never heard of the Harlem Renaissance, for example. I became, in 64, when I returned home, 3 young people were murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Civil rights workers, Freedom Summer. They were white and black. You remember the names, right? Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman. And that they were murdered by police and the Ku Klux Klan, and trying to do voter registration for black folks. And that just changed my life forever. I simply went directly into the black community, which in Boston is called Roxbury. It's still the intact black community of Boston, ghetto, as we used to say in the old days. And a scene of misery, it still is. And I just walked in and I became a 4th grade teacher in the public schools. And was just thrown right into it. I'd never studied education. I knew nothing about teaching. But I found then what you'd still find in New York or Chicago, almost anywhere else in America. If you know nothing about education, but are willing to maybe put in 6 weeks for something like Teach for America, they'll put you immediately into the most segregated, underfunded, troubled schools in America, as long as you're a living body. And so they immediately put me in. I was a 4th grade teacher. My kids had 12 teachers before me that year, so I was their 13th teacher. And I wrote a book about that year. It's called Death at an Early Age: The Destruction of the Hearts and Minds of Negro Children in Boston. It was published shortly before Dr. King's assassination, and probably partly because of the literary world's desperate wish to pay honor to King, it received the National Book Award, a Iowa surrogate for Dr. King. They didn't have a category for social justice, so I received the National Book Award in philosophy and religion, which pleased my parents. And
you have some water.
it's all right.
There's some in that podium right
I
there.
just have a chronic cough. And I won't go into any great detail, except you can find it all in the book, which is in an inexpensive paperback. The year ended with my having learned from one of the black parents, one of the parents of my kids, for the first time, the name of Langston Hughes. Mind you, I was an American and British literature major at a reasonably good college. And so that helped me to reverse some of the stereotypes of sociologists about, black homes bare books or rich cultural tradition. My mother put me on to Langston. So one day I bought a copy of the book of his poems in Harvard Square and brought it in and read it to my kids. Several poems, including A Dream Deferred. You all know that. Well, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or does it explode? It's a great one. How many of you read that in high school or college? And it proved very moving to the kids. It broke the ice. And one black girl, tall, a beautiful girl, had been very hostile to me until then, as rightly she might have been, since she'd been treated, she'd already been so badly damaged by the white society in her segregated school. Why should she trust the 13th white guy to show up, right? But after I read that poem, she melted and she came up to me and she very gently stroked my arm in a sweet way. And she whispered, "Thank you." It's the first time she could almost feel like, and she said to me since I've been in the classroom. And she asked if could I bring that book home and show it to my mom. I was so happy I would have given her my car. And the next day she came in and recited the poem she'd memorized. And the next day I was fired from the Boston Public Schools because Langston Hughes was considered a dangerous leftist. And it became a cause that the parents of my kids were very loyal. A lot of young white teachers have been warned by ignorant people in their schools of education that black folks will never stick up for white people because they'll only look after their own. A racist assumption, so they're more ignorant than other parents. I've found Black and Latino parents are colorblind when it comes to the best interests of their child if they think you're really trying. And they shut down the school the next day. They were so angry. And then the following week, they virtually shut down the Boston public school system. A year later, I was hired by the top suburban school system outside of Boston at twice the salary I was getting in Boston, with 19 students instead of 35. A school district, as it happened, is the top white suburban district of Boston, which we call Newton, Massachusetts, which had just initiated the first inter-district integration program in the nation, which is now a tremendous program in Boston, voluntary. So for the first time, so I went from teaching in a rock-bottom, segregated, and unequal school that also was ugly and smelly and looked like a haunted house, to a lovely school with a principal who adored the kids. He particularly looked after the black kids who came out from the inner city. Of course, she was so grateful that their parents were trusting her with their children. And that changed me forever. And by the way, that program, which exists to this day, is so successful. 90% of the black kids who ride a very short bus ride, 20 minutes each day, to go to school in Newton, 90% of them, 95% of them graduate in 4 years with their class, and virtually all go on to 4-year colleges. The typical inner city rate nowadays is about, if you're lucky, 50% black and Latino kids graduate in 4 years. In New York and Chicago, which together, it's amazing, together, just New York and Chicago educate 10% of all black males in America. Black kids probably, but I'm thinking males now particularly. 70% of black males in those two districts. That's 10% of all, 70% of, 10% of all black secondary school males in America fail to graduate in 4 years. Most of them never graduate. And here is the exact opposite. In a very well done integration program, black mentors from the city are assigned to every school. Perhaps not surprisingly, that program, which is now in its 40th year, and run by one of my closest friends, Jean McGuire, who you ought to invite out here someday. She's a dynamo. A very important figure in Boston's black community. Jean told me recently she has a waiting list of 16,000 black kids who want to get into the program. That is 1/3 of all the black families in Boston. Who all are black school-age kids in Boston. Black folks still believe in integration. That they do when they have a real chance at a good integration program where their children will be treated with respect, and where an enormous effort will be made to assure that they will be in a truly undivided school where there will not be covert internal segregation. Okay? And I believe, I didn't really need this experience to believe it. My sense of morality and Dr. King's eloquence would convince me anyway. But now I know from my own lived experience, from all the years since in which I've visited constantly in the classrooms with teachers. I don't go to institutes of public policy usually. like to be with the frontline soldiers, the teachers in the classrooms, those much maligned teachers. I like to be with the first grade teacher when one of her adorable little sixth graders who's sitting in my lap suddenly throws up all over me. Peas and, you know. One wonderful first grade teacher I love in Roxbury says to me, Jonathan, you got to understand, first grade is weak. They're leaky little people. She said, sometimes from their eyes, when they're sad, but usually from the other end. And, from these years of experience, I've come to the implacable belief that the words of the Warren Court were exactly right. And they did not say simply, legally, that jure segregated schools will harm children for the rest of their lives. They said segregated schools. Although the decision applied only to de jure segregated schools, they made a larger moral point. I believe they're right. I think history has proven ever since Plessy in 1896, separate schools have never been equal in America. And I'm not speaking as some who defend segregation often like to mock people like me, and they say, Clarence Thomas mocks me, people like me, and he says, or they think we'll get smarter sitting next to them. Well, that's the cheap rhetoric of a stupid man. He's an insult, to the Supreme Court, an insult, an ultimate insult that he took Thurgood Marshall's seat. He's the ultimate affirmative action appointee, by the way, because, the president had to put a black man in Thurgood Marshall's seat, so what does he do? He picks one who, well, I won't be mean. Say that very night. Boy, the Republicans sure seem to, they must have a training camp for dumb black guys who can't speak a cogent sentence, but will parrot what the man in the big house says, and will do the job for the master. Because Rod Page was, whom I also knew, I knew him, I've never met Justice Thomas. I knew Rod Page, and he really, he couldn't speak a sentence that meant anything. If you wanted to teach literary writing, a writing class, you wanted to teach what a circular sentence is, you could take almost any of the sentences, and they would prove that end got you back to the beginning. Do you know what I mean? But, like restructuring schools, striving for excellence.
Speaking of the president, or speaking as the
No, I'm speaking of Secretary Page, but I often think Mr. Bush appointed him precisely so that when they had conversations, neither of them would feel humiliated or insecure with the other. But here's what I believe. No matter how some people today, there are some blacks who try to romanticize the good old days of segregation, the Jim Crow days. They tend to be blacks who are also protecting their own sinecure of power, those who, are mayor, like the mayor of East St. Louis used to do that, which is a nightmare city, totally black city, the misery central in America. I know that city. It's in Illinois. It's in Missouri. No, it's in Illinois. It's just across the river from St. Louis, Missouri. It's usually someone who's, a black conservative, or black covert conservative, who's protecting his own hegemony or her own hegemony, so she justifies and says, oh, we can have perfectly good and happy segregation as long as it's restructured and test-driven and accountable and all that usual jargon, that terrible ed jargon. You can have happy segregation, happy apartheid in our school system, but they're wrong. And I took the words of some of these folks, because I have lots of friends, Afrocentrists, who, it's usually actually, it's usually black folks who have benefited from the best integrated schools and have gotten into the top colleges, who somehow, in an effort to piss off their liberal white classmates, will suddenly start defending segregation. They seem to just feel there's a amount of pride they have to upset their. And I can understand why. I think it's in order not to seem too grateful, something like that. It's a matter of dignity. But these are people who usually benefited from good integrated schooling. And I'm very controversial, aren't I? I don't give a, I'm 70 years old, I don't give a damn who I dislike. Black people I revere, Marion Wright Edelman, the great Roger Wilkins, Congressman John Lewis, Ted Shaw, the great Director Counsel of NAACP, Legal Defense Fund. These are the people I love. I know they agree with me on these things. Some of them won't say these things, actually. I know from years of friendship how they feel. And what I regret so much is that at this moment in our history, just as we are celebrating these 50th anniversaries of Brown, as we did a year or two ago, and of Central High integration, which you will be doing here in Little Rock in September, is that right? Yeah. September 57, 50 years. At the very moment, whether because of Rehnquist court decisions that have eviscerated Brown, or because of white flight facilitated by persistent redlining in the real estate industry, or because of the proliferation of white private schools as escape avenues for white folks so they can do white flight without even moving from the city, which are really modern versions of those old white Christian academies that started up in the South after Brown. Remember that? No, not very Christian in my mind. If any of them show up tonight, I'm going to tell them that they need to reread the gospel, because the Gospels don't say, I happen to be Jewish, but I consider myself an expert on Jesus' true intent. And I spent a lot of time in black churches. Thank goodness the preachers of black churches let me preach in our churches sometimes. I love that. They trample on the meaning of the Gospels when they set up exclusionary schools and call them Christian schools. It's a shame. I don't think these, first of all, I don't think we should celebrate, I don't think we should go through these celebration moments, like the one you're about to have in Little Rock, and simply use it to glamorize the past and to honor the courage of 9 black kids who did something remarkable and gave a light to the whole nation by their courage 50 years ago by walking into Central High with paratroopers to defend them. I don't think Little Rock really has the right to celebrate that, since all the powerful people in Little Rock opposed what they did. I think the way to honor them is by looking with an unflinching eye at what the Little Rock school system is like today. Just as when we celebrated Brown nationally, Ted Shore and Gary Orfield and I and many others insisted that we not allow Americans to think that the victories of Brown persist. They don't persist, except in the de jure sense that American public schools today are more segregated. Black kids are more segregated today than they were at any time since 1968, because of the Rehnquist rule, primarily. But right here in Little Rock, there are tremendous contradictions, and people have to look hard at what's happening. In a sense, on the surface, it looks very different. You know, nobody's keeping black kids out of schools. It's just that white people, for the most part, aren't going to the Little Rock schools anymore. There are 2 high schools that are genuinely integrated. Central High. Parkway is the other? Parkview. And you can be very proud of that, but they have problems of internal segregation, which must be looked at with real lucidity and clarity, and not sugarcoat it in order to have a happy celebration next fall. That you got to look at that, find out, what's going on. Why is it you have a school that's 50-50, roughly, children of color and Caucasian kids, but so few of the black kids in honors and AP and so forth, like 2 schools in one. That happens a lot in the nation where the school integration is not handled with real wisdom. And that's got to be looked at. Instead of spending $250,000 to set up speaker stands and so forth, that's the sum I saw in your newspaper that's been budgeted for a celebration next September, to which, by the way, I was absolutely heartsick to see that they plan to invite the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court and President Bush. Mr. Bush has just gone to court, as you know. His Attorney General has just gone to court in a case called the Louisville-Seattle case, which this was just December. The president entered the case as filed an amicus brief, basically becoming co-plaintiff with a small right-wing white group that's trying to prohibit even voluntary school integration in America, even voluntary integration. So the program I was telling you about in Boston will be abolished. And it looks like the court is probably going to vote, because of the way it's stacked now, it's probably going to abolish these last remaining programs. To invite President Bush here is to insult those 9 young people. To invite that Supreme Court here is like taking a 2-foot plank and slamming it across the foreheads of the Warren Court members. It's like bloodying their faces. You should take that $250,000 instead and use it to hire 5 really terrific, black or white, mentors, teachers, whose specific job would be to coach, tutor, mentor the black kids at Central High to enable them to qualify for honors and AP courses, so they can go to four-year colleges. That's a better use of the money, instead of letting a bunch of politicians get up and give speeches. That's my own belief. That's what you should do. And I have to go back to my hotel now and get a little rest, because Dalton gonna kill me. I actually am not a mean and grouchy person. I like to deal with little kids largely because they're so sweet. And I find the inner city kids every bit as sweet as the privileged little white kids, sometimes sweeter. And that's been the, people always say, what keeps you going? Why do you keep going? Because my views are ugly, out of fashion, you know. Nobody talks about segregation anymore. They say, make life easy for yourself. Why don't you talk about something nice like corporate partnerships with segregated schools? And you could get a grant for case foundations. No, I won't bite my tongue. I'm too old to bite my tongue. I'm going to say what I believe. Marion Edelman says we need a new civil rights movement in this nation. And she had said this time we probably should start in the big northern cities like New York and Chicago. And I agree with her. And I hope your generation will be the ones to start it. And I hope you do it fast and soon. Because I want to stick around.